Well, I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Peter Donno. Peter is an author who has written an amazing book called A Manual for the Human Spirit. But before we even get to talk about the book, we need to know a little bit about Peter himself, because Peter, you're not from Kilkenny.
No, I'm from Brighton in England.
And you now have come to live in Kilkenny, and it is an amazing story. You might just tell our listeners about that story, because you went from Brighton to the ferry with a lot of your belongings, to Galway, and then to Kilkenny. So it's an eventful journey along the way.
Yeah, it all started when I lost a court case, and my son was allowed, who at the time was, I think, about 4 years old, and my son at the time was allowed to leave the jurisdiction of the United Kingdom and come and live with his mother in Kilkenny in Ireland. And then things became quite awkward, quite frustrating, and then COVID started as well. So the whole thing became this mess of frustration of me actually not being able to see my son. So I decided on after I'd been through the court case, and then I hit the floor. I fell into just depression. I mean, I couldn't function properly. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't do anything. I was in a mess.
And you had been working in England at this age yourself?
Yeah. I had a building company in England at that time, and that had stopped because I was unable to function. I was seriously depressed. I some very, very dark thoughts. And then what happened was I had this one moment where I had an image where a passing ship threw me a lifeline, and I realised at that point in time I had a decision to make. Was I going to live my life in depression or do something about it? And I was going to be defined by what I did next or what had just happened. And I decided that was it. I had to learn from what had happened, surrender to that, and now just be defined by what I was going to do next, which was to stand up and sort my life out.
The journey from Brighton, as I said, to Kilkenny took on a whole life of its own. You might just tell our listeners about that, because heading towards the ferry in Holyhead brought its own challenges, and then over to Galway and then down to Kilkenny.
Yeah. It's so what happened was I had this moment where I realised that my relationship with my son was in tatters. It needed us to be together in the same country, and that was as simple as that. So I sat there for a day or two, thought about it, and then went, that's it, enough. I was going to move. And I just went, right, 4 weeks from now, phoned up, booked the ferry, and then just went hell for leather. And I was living in a beautiful flat on Hove Seafront, views of the sea. I had a Mercedes convertible. I had a job that I didn't really like, but I was kind of, that was my lifestyle basically. And within 4 weeks, I'd exchanged the Mercedes for a pickup. The flat had gone. I'd exchanged that for a caravan. I put all my research papers, all my kids' tools, Sid's tools into the caravan, and all my tools in the back of the pickup. And then I decided, right, that's it, time to go. And the day that I went to leave, the lock on the caravan fell, and I couldn't get the wheel lock off, but I had all the tools in the back. So I spent the first hour and a half, 2 hours of the journey cutting the lock off the caravan, finally got it going, heading north towards Wales. Halfway up the motorway, coming out of the other side of London, the caravan gets hit by this broadside and these grooves in the road, and starts swerving backwards and forwards across all 3 lanes and the hard shoulder. I finally managed to get it under control. My heart rate was just through the roof. I mean, it was quite one of those heat-making moments, do you know what I mean? So that's a bit much. I managed to slow it down and thought, wow, that's getting a bit tricky. As I'm driving up the motorway, I've noticed that this light was coming on the dashboard. Finally getting to Wales, get up to the last mountain before you actually come down into Holyhead into the port. As I'm going up the hill, all the lights on the dashboard start coming on. All of a sudden, bang, the engine blows up. As the engine blows up, it was one of those jobs I was like, go on, is that the best you got? Like looking out the window. And that's when the storm hit. And I can only describe this storm as, and I've never seen anything like it. It was like every drop of rain was connected to every other drop of rain, and coming at me at about 70 miles an hour. It was incredible. But this amazing man turned up and saved the day, got me into Holyhead. Obviously, the ferry's been delayed and cancelled. The people from Irish Ferries let me stay underneath a sign that said no caravanning. I stayed there for a couple of days, and people were just so kind, and helpful. And then once the ferry got going, a couple of days later, got on the ferry, got a new van delivered, a pickup delivered, because the other one had blown up in the mountains. Got the new one delivered. As I was coming out the tunnel in Dublin, off the ferry, I noticed that it was slightly hot, and then I realised the new pickup only had 2 heat settings. It had off and the centre of the sun. It was so hot. I drove from Dublin to Galway with all the windows open. It was just unbelievable. So that one had to go back as well when I got the moment to do it. During all this, I managed to get another pickup that actually worked, delivered to Galway. That one gets sent back. I'm now living in Galway and in a friend's garden, and I'm seeing my son sporadically. But then the government 2 years ago said, OK, in the October, they went, we're going to close down the borders. But they did it over a very short amount of time. Yeah,
that's the borders now from Bristol, but from county to county, of course.
Yeah, which meant that I was in Galway. I heard that at 9 o'clock in the morning. I had to be on the road at 1 o'clock to beat the 6 o'clock. I think it was a 6 o'clock deadline or something. Or the midnight deadline for that journey. So that was it. I was back on the road again, loaded the caravan with all the tools and all the toys and the research papers, and then came to Kilkenny and walked straight into a housing crisis where there's nowhere to rent, there's nowhere to buy. I wanted to buy somewhere of reasonable price. I'm a builder, I can do things up, or I was a builder. But there was nowhere to live, and then I made a phone call to Nor Valley Caravan Park, and graciously they let me stay there. I mean, I can't tell you how grateful I am to not only Nor Valley Caravan Park, but everyone I've met along this journey has been so helpful, so kind. It humbles me.
Now you've become part of the whole setup down in Nor Valley Park, to an extent, I suppose.
As it turned out that Gareth, who runs the pet farm side of it, he needed someone who could repair a lot of the stuff that he's got on the pet farm, and then because he does these events like the Santa Claus experience up at McDonough Junction, he wanted a Father Christmas. So he's like, right, Pete, could you be Father Christmas? So I grew a beard, I became Father. And then he wants this ecological centre for bees being built in the shape of a hexagon of a pod for bees that I'm designing for them. So all my skill base seemed to fit what he needed, and what he had fitted what I needed, which was somewhere to stay. And now I'm in Kilkenny and seeing my son. So,
and of course, you didn't mention at all that's part of your experience is being an actor.
Yes, one of.
And that helped you in the Santa Claus role.
Absolutely. I've done kind of Shakespeare, and whether you're the priest or the soldier or whoever, you portray a character, and you expect the audience to kind of to believe in that character. But when you've got a grey beard and you put on that outfit to be Santa Claus, the kids, the responsibility is unbelievable. I mean, they walk in like they've just had an epiphanictic moment. They look at you with absolute love and trust and beauty, and obviously hope that you're going to give them a nice present.
Well, Peter, you did say that in your press release and in your book, the words spirit and energy, they pop up regularly.
Yeah.
Now, explain how they both gave you the strength to cope with the challenges that you've just been talking about.
Oh, that's a very good question. Positivity is basically what it comes down to, is being able to understand we have to let go of the past. So all the events that had happened to me were in the past. Now, if I was to focus on those, it wouldn't have given me the energy to see the future, to perceive the future. So the way that energy works is that, and science is now proving this, is that thoughts are the language of the mind, and they're basically electrical. Emotions is the language of the soul, and they're magnetic. And the trick is that you send out a positive thought. And for me, it was to see my son, to be healthy, to go on adventure and surrender to it. So that's the thought I sent out. What I brought back was the feelings that I would have when I achieved those experiences. But I didn't wait for those events to happen. I lived the feeling of those events when I made the decision that that's what I was going to do.
Now, you did talk about that when you were leaving Brighton, that the 30 years of research papers, books and diagrams about the human energy system, you pulled them from every corner of your past, you brought them with you, and they're at the kind of the fulcrum of the whole essence of a manual for the human spirit.
I wrote the book for two people. I wrote the big book for my son so as he understood how energy works, because it's a very important part of our lives, and it can be used for anything. It can be used for the individual, it can be used for families, it can be used for sporting teams, it can be used for governments, businesses. It doesn't matter what it is. Everything has a mind, body and a soul. And if you can line those up, you have a very powerful unit in any environment. Scientifically now that can be proved. So what I was trying to do by the book was remind myself of what I have to do to get out of the mess that I was in. And boy, my life was a mess.
Now, obviously you said the book was aimed at your son, who was still a young boy.
Yeah.
Who's the other person it was aimed at?
Me.
And what did the process do for you? Because it appears to be some sort of a self-healing process you've gone through.
That's exactly what happened. So it made me get my life in order. It made me realise that regardless of what my ego and my tears and my pity party and my frustrations were trying to tell me, which were false information, was that there was something greater than that. And that is your soul, that's your spirit. And that is what I should connect to. Not the past, not my ego, but the future and my spirit. And the science, I needed to reaffirm all that into myself. So I started pulling out all my scientists.
And where did you actually gather those research papers from over the years? This is clearly a topic and a subject that you've been involved in over a long period of time, aside from the building work you were doing.
I was born with a lot of energy, which caused problems for me as a child. And I reached a stage where I wanted to know how it worked. And so, because I was a mess. So I wanted to know what the energy influence was on my life, and then I started reading, because I couldn't read or write when I left school, but then I was able to start, once I found a subject that I wanted to know about, which was how to control my energy. Then I was able to start reading scientific papers and cross-reference them, and I couldn't even believe I was doing it. I mean, it was mental.
But all of us who are in this building here or out on the streets of Kilkenny, we all exercise different levels of energy at different stages. How do we all have different levels of energy? What are the constituent parts that make up each of our energies?
So you have basically three minds, and if you read the book, there's references to all the scientists who have put this together.
I actually saw that, and it's actually an intriguing part of the history of some of the most famous scientists of all time that would be familiar to many of our listeners.
Yeah, Dr. Stephen Peters was the psychiatrist who helped the British Olympic team excel, and what he found was that there's the minds, there are ways of connecting the mind to the body. If you connect the mind, body and soul, everything has a mind, body and soul. Everything. Organisations, the government has a mind, body and soul. And if you can get those in alignment and not plugged into the past, but plugged into a positive future, and they can live that experience now, then what happens is that you just generate a lot of energy. You get more energy coming through your system, because the moment you say, oh, I hate that person from the past, then you're donating your energy that you need now to regenerate your cell tissue. You're donating that energy to somebody you hate in the past, and they don't give a monkeys if you hate them, because it's not affecting them, it's affecting you.
Now, you wrote in the book, we evolved from an explosion called the Big Bang. There would be many people who have religious views who would say that people evolved from a different process, a greater being. How do you tally those two?
Because there's also, there's lots of different religions have different ways. The Bashongo people of Africa say it as a god threw up. The Aboriginals say that it was through dream time. So there's many different interpretations of it. But what I'm trying to say in the book is that regardless of this interpretation, there is a conscious energy, and it's, some call it the body of Christ, but it's a consciousness that actually now the Germans, scientists and mathematicians, are trying to find a way of extrapolating the information that we put into that and we get out of it. So it's something that exists, but it's such a subtle thing. A spiritual belief is a very subtle thing. until you get a download, and then you realise that is more real than anything else you've experienced before.
I was intrigued that, given the weakness in it for particular reasons, you cover the whole issue of 5G and broadband in the book, and given that there's a lot in the media this week about the rolling out of 5G broadband and the impact on air travel. What's your view on that?
I'm not up to speed with the bit about the air travel, but the bit about 5G is that, so if you run electricity through a cable, they've now realised that there's a field, an electromagnetic field around that. That exactly the same thing happens to us. So we are like a light bulb, and around us is a very subtle field of electromagnetic energy, and that's called a biofield, and it's the shape of a torus, which is basically the shape of the universe. The problem with 5G is that when your cells, if it's too powerful, you have to have it monitored and you have to have it recorded. But if you allow yourself to stand too close to the aerial, then what happens is that the cells and molecules that are trying to regrow back to their natural blueprint, their jelly mould, where they're meant to go, they start regenerating back to the place where there's an influence with the radiation. So that is what can cause serious illnesses. So you don't want that massive influence onto your field. It's not that good for you. It's
a fascinating topic. Peter, this book is available in, tell us where in Kilkenny.
You can get it at Cairns Bookshop in
James Street. We know Can Books. We have a lot of people come in here who have their books in Can Bookshop.
And also in the city...
The book centre.
The book centre
on High Street.
Yeah, so at the moment it's in those two books. It's being sold through the website multiversalenergy.com, where you can pick up more information. I've written the book, and I know it's a heavy book to understand, but it is a manual, so people can dip into different areas of it, and try and find out what their entrance into this is. Later on, I'm going to be doing a YouTube video. Then, because of my acting experience, I'm also going to be doing stage shows, and we've been talking to people in Kuala Lumpur about possibly creating an education module, because when you think about it, at school, what are the two lessons that they don't really teach? Well, they don't teach them about their energy, and they don't teach them about money. Surely those should be the two most important. They should be the first things you learn.
Well, Peter, Donno, it's been a fascinating topic. We could talk about it all day. And when I saw the book, first of all, I will say it probably intimidated me, but when I got into it, I got to understand some of what you were about. But as you say, it is a manual. It's worth picking up, and delightful to talk to you. And now that you're out in Nor Valley Park, we might have plenty of reasons to talk to you again about things that are happening out there. So good wishes out there, Peter.
Thank you very much, Nickey. Thank you.